We're your hosts, Cherry Chan
and Thomas Shum,
and you're listening to Queers and Allies.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Queers and Allies. I'm your host, Thomas.
And I'm Cherry.
And today we have Mimi Wong, who is a trans female filmmaker and the founder of Association for World Citizen, an organization that promotes equal rights for everyone. She is also the executive producer and filmmaker of A Woman is a Woman and Hong Kong Transgender Stories. So Mimi, welcome to the show.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Mimi Wong.
Hi. So Mimi, could you please introduce yourself to our audiences who may not be as familiar with you?
Okay, I am a female, transgender female, as you've just said. I transitioned quite late in my life. So it was 11 years ago. And I undergone the sex reassignment surgery at that time. And as a result of that, I lost my job and also lost my family. And so after spending 2 years in vain trying to look for an alternative employment and failed. So I decided that I would spend my time on doing something for the trans community. And that's why I set up the Association of World Citizens. And because it's not a local organization and it's based in Geneva.
As I understand, it's also has a relationship with the United Nations, right?
Yes,
yes. Yeah, okay. Could you explain that relationship and how that works?
They actually have a consultative status there, and they actually acting as an NGO, which is doing a lot of consultative work on a lot of issues, including human rights, world peace, and environmental protection. So these are the basic work that they do. And of course, when I set up, what I told our president is that we will only focus on the human rights issue with specific emphasis on the trans rights in Hong Kong. And he agreed to that, and that's how we started.
So as you said in your previous answer, you came out as transgender fairly lately in your life. So in comparison to transgendered individuals nowadays, how would you say your experience about knowing about the transgender community was different?
Yeah, because right now we've actually reached the information age, and it's a lot easier for people to access information that was not available at my time. And I was living as a man for a good part of my life because what I know about myself is I have to conform myself to become a man and act like a man throughout the bigger part of my life. And it was only until the internet age that I was able to surf the internet and try to find out, is there anything or anybody who is identical to myself? I was hiding my thinking all the time for the whole part of my life at that time. And when I was able to identify myself, I was already over 50 years old.
So how would you encourage those young people who may be unsure of their gender identity right now to step forward? Would you say, because you came out later in life, would you say that, would you advocate for an earlier change? Perhaps if you could go back and change?
I think it's a big decision in life. So, although people might be able to access the information about transgender much earlier, but still I think they need to go through a process to affirm that this is what they really want to do. Because the process itself may not be reversible, especially for those who decided to undergo a surgery. Of course, I know that more and more people in the trans community is electing not to have surgery at all. But still, there are people who would want to go through this process, and this process is not reversible. So they really need to have a process where they need to search their own soul and understand themselves better before they make this life decision.
Do you think that Hong Kong's outdated perceptions of transgendered people are harmful and it prevents there being any change in people's perceptions?
It's really because, especially people who are actually taking helm of Hong Kong right now, and people at the top, at the administration, or even in the electrical, people there, most of them are very conservative. And they just don't believe that transgender is right. Because they are not us. How could they be able to understand what we think? Just like if you have other illness or diseases, just like somebody suffering from hallucinations. You, as a healthy person, you won't be able to imagine what's in their mind. It's just the same. So you put yourself into our shoe and then have some kind of empathy. I think that's important.
So speaking on people at the top, you said, who are very conservative, would you want to see Hong Kong's government or legislation enact more laws around transgendered people and perhaps enact more regulations around transgender people?
Yeah, we have been asking for regulations to protect transgender people from discrimination. We're asking for legislation to protect people due to a different gender identity. And in fact, not just that, we would extend it to people with a different gender expression as well. There are some people who do not identify themselves as transgender, but they may have a different gender expression, and they are being denied as an acceptable behavior by society. While we are fighting for people against discrimination, against different gender identity, we at the same time would also hope that people with a different gender expression will be protected as well. And of course, another important thing is gender recognition. And right now in Hong Kong, even after you have undergone the gender reaffirming surgery, legally, we are still considered, just like myself, I'm still considered as a man. And the reason, in fact, it's not recent, it's already 3-4 years ago, a consultation about whether Hong Kong should introduce gender recognition ordinance. And within that paper that was produced by the consultative committee, they said explicitly right now, the procedure to change the Hong Kong ID card from male to female is purely an administrative process and not a legal recognition. They stated explicitly in that piece of paper.
So you also mentioned just then that when you transitioned, you unfortunately lost your job as well, but now you've turned to the arts such as theater and film to use as a form of self-expression. So how did you come to discover those two outlets, and how are they used in your advocacy regarding trans issues?
One of the key things that we do as part of our organization is to educate the public. And we've been doing direct education as well, like human library sessions, or even direct talk about what transgenderism is. But this is not easily repeatable because I have to arrange people to come to every single session. But if we use the media, like a film, as the vehicle, and once it's produced, once it's done, I could actually show it to different people again and again and again. So the cost of producing a movie or film may be high, but then the way that I could actually present it again and again to the audience is, to me, is a good investment.
So for those of you listening at home who don't know, your film, Mimi's film, A Woman is a Woman, is adapted from a true story, and it's based on the stories of two transgendered women in different stages of their lives. So why do you think, Mimi, it's important for films like yours to represent such a marginalized group of people in society?
Because we could tell the story from our own perspective. There are other movies that were produced by other people. And even the very famous movie that actually got award from Oscar. I myself have viewed that movie as well, but to me it's still not representing our actual thinking, because it's the external people looking into our mind. And whatever extensive research that they have done is still somewhat apart from the real thing. So we think if we're able to do something which is based on our own telling of our own story, that would be the best approach to present what transgenderism is to the other people.
Would you also say that the film A Woman is a Woman is important because there needs to be transgendered representation for a Hong Kong story, since, like you said, there are so many other films that have been produced regarding transgender stories, but they may not be as applicable to those living here?
Yeah, that's true as well. So because we're telling a story of two trans women in Hong Kong, and they're actually a lot more relevant to the situation or that are being faced by trans women in Hong Kong, because we're choosing two trans women. So the film itself, the focus of the film is on trans women.
So you announced last night that the Association for World Citizen is closing after you finish up all your activities here. And as we understand, this will be one of your last interviews as the founder of AWC. So could you shed a little light on what went wrong with the organization and what happened? Just a little bit detail so our viewers at home can understand.
I think I have to talk about this from two perspectives. And myself, because I came out late, so after working so many years to fight for trans rights, and I'm getting older and older, and I think there's the need for some new blood to carry on the process, and I think to me is the right time to step down. And of course, from another perspective, is there were actually some incident that happened recently with respect to the dispute on the definition of what transgender is. And there were some fierce discussion on that. And basically, even now, everybody's not just Hong Kong, everywhere. The term itself is so confusing. And therefore, different parties will adopt different views about what exactly it is. Of course, from the perspective of our organization, we have our own view as well. And there are people who have a different view. And if these people cannot control themselves while talking through their differences, some kind of conflicts arose. And there were some fierce exchanges of languages that occur over the net in the past few days. And we also feel that I myself has to be responsible for that because one of the person who expressed those languages were one of our officers. And so it's also right for me to think that, or to actually close down the association right now, because since we're making a mistake, and therefore we have to be responsible.
Could you explain a little bit about what your group did in Hong Kong and its process in helping transgender people integrate into society?
So we actually have a mission or vision that eventually the people in the trans society are empowered to be able to live in their own identity in the Hong Kong environment. So this is one thing that we do. And the second thing, of course, is we go straight to the community and educate the people about who we are. And as you have mentioned a while ago, so we produce some movies, and that's one of the vehicles that we do. And out of the movie, and I think recently we've been doing a photo exhibition called Transcendence Art Show, which is still running in the Chinese University right now. So it has it's still on at the time. Right now at New Asia College Library. So we portray 11 trans models and with their quotations as well. So we hope that through this kind of processes, we should be able to let people to understand the issues and different facets of trans people in Hong Kong. So it's the education part. And of course, we also do direct education, as I said before. And the other thing that we do is we try to fight for equality. For people who have suffered unequal treatment in their lives. And if they're willing to bring forth the problem to us, we would help them to resolve it. But of course, from our past experience, not every single problem is resolvable. But we'll try our best to do it.
So speaking about education, while we're on the topic, what does you mentioned previously about the definition of transgenderness being a very varied and wide spectrum, or there's a lot of people who don't agree on the same definition. So Mimi, what is your definition of transgenderness?
The way that we would try to define transgenderism is somebody who has a different perception of the gender from what are being assigned at birth. So let's say if you are born a man, and if your own internal perception is you are a woman, then you are a trans woman. And of course, if it is the opposite, then you are a trans man. So it's an internal perception. It's nothing to do with your external expression. Just like if somebody who purely dress up in the manner that somebody might perceive that they belong to the other gender, but if in their heart they still identify themselves to belong to the original sex being assigned at birth, then this person is purely a person with a different gender expression. And they are not a person with a different gender identity. And we are excluding them from either being a trans man or being a trans woman.
Also in relation to transgenderedness, unfortunately, transgenderness is seen as a mental illness up until the past decade or so. And it's unfortunate that people think about the issue that way. Luckily, LGBTQ rights and the activism pushing the movement has been gaining recognition globally. Would you say that there's more recognition here in Hong Kong, and has there been an effort to change people's perceptions regarding transgenderness?
I think we still have a long way to go. And I think the more educated people tends to be more receptive. And I should say the younger, more educated people tends to be more receptive. But for the older generation, even if they're well educated, they're still not. And for the younger generation, if they have not gone through tertiary education, I think because in the secondary education in Hong Kong, there's very little curriculum that speaks about or introducing the concept of gender identity. And therefore, if they have not got a chance to go to university and get the education about gender identity, then still their thinking is quite aligned with the older generation. And therefore, if we add these two groups of people together, we are often the people who are able to accept transgender people is always a small proportion of the total population, and that's very sad.
So previously you said that you want to see some new blood in the transgender community fighting for rights and activism here in Hong Kong. So what is your ultimate vision of what you want to see as in the transgender community, and how would you see new people, new blood, young people try to step up this activism and try to step up the fight for equality for transgender rights?
I think it's important that the person who wants to pick up this role to be dedicated. And we do know that, but I think it's most of the people in the trans community, they would rather just shut themselves away. And there are not a lot of people who are willing to stand up and protect their own rights. And what most people in the trans community tend to do is, as long as they complete their transition, they just hide themselves. They just hide their identity, and nobody would know that they are trans anymore. And this is very common. But even that, I could see that there's also a rising number of people who has this kind of willingness to dedicate themselves into this type of activism. So this is a good sign to me.
So that's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us, Mimi, and we wish you all the best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.